Have you ever felt like someone kept you around, not out of love but out of convenience? My name is Margaret. I'm 78 years old, and what I'm about to share with you still makes my chest tighten, even after all this time. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was in the living room folding a blanket when I heard something I was never supposed to hear. My son, my only child, the boy I raised with everything I had, was in the kitchen talking to his wife. He thought I wasn't listening. He said, clear as day, "She's only here because of her retirement check." And just like that, the world I thought I knew cracked open. You ever have one of those moments where your body goes cold, but your face burns? Where your heart knows it's heard the truth, and it hits harder than any lie ever could? That was me, standing there, clutching a soft fleece blanket like it could somehow protect me from the sentence that shattered everything I believed about my family. I wasn't supposed to hear that, I wasn't supposed to know, but I did. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. You can't go back to pretending you're safe in a place that suddenly feels like a cage. When he invited me to move in with them a few months back, I truly believed it was an act of love. I had started to slow down a bit, my knees aren't what they used to be, and living alone wasn't easy anymore. I'd lost my husband 10 years ago, and the quiet in that house was growing louder by the day. So when my son said, "Come live with us, Mom, you shouldn't be alone," I said yes, not because I wanted to give up my independence, but because I thought I was being welcomed into something warm, something safe, something rooted in love. But love doesn't talk about you like a transaction. That one sentence unraveled everything. It made every polite smile, every closed-door conversation, every time they forgot to tell me about plans, they all took on a different color, a colder one. I started to question everything. Was the offer to move in really about caring for me, or was it about gaining access to my retirement check, my Social Security payments? Was I a mother, or just a financial asset? You ever question your worth inside your own family? It's a kind of pain that's hard to explain. Not because it's sharp, but because it's slow. It seeps in. You start noticing how they don't ask about your day, how they rearranged the guest room before you arrived, but never made space for your books, how they take your check to cover household expenses but never talk about the budget. And suddenly, you're no longer a guest. You're a burden with benefits. But what they didn't know is I was paying attention. And what I would uncover in the days that followed would not only confirm my deepest fears, it would expose the truth behind everything. What you're about to hear next might surprise you. Because behind their smiles and small talk, there was a plan I never agreed to. A plan I was never supposed to find out about. Now I want to go even deeper into this. Because what I began to uncover wasn't just about money. It was about how easy it is to become invisible when people think you have nothing left to give. There were things they said behind closed doors, conversations I wasn't meant to hear, decisions they made about my life as if I weren't still in it. The little signs turned into patterns, and the patterns revealed something far more deliberate than I ever imagined. And maybe you felt something like that too. Maybe you've been in a room full of family and still felt completely alone. Or maybe someone close to you made you feel like your value was tied to what you could offer, not who you are. If that hits home, I want to hear from you. Truly, if this story echoes anything in your heart, leave a comment below. Share your experience, or just tell me what part of this touched you the most. I read every message. And when you share, you're not just speaking for yourself, you're giving voice to others who are going through the same thing in silence. And if this kind of story matters to you, if it made you feel seen, or made you think of someone you love, go ahead and hit the like button. That one small gesture helps this message reach more people who might need to hear it right now. It shows that there's space for conversations like this, honest, emotional, sometimes painful, but necessary. And if you want to keep walking through stories like this with me, real stories, hard truths, things most people won't say out loud, then I invite you to subscribe to this channel, not just to support it, but to be part of something we're building here. A space where older voices are not only heard, but honored. A space where pain can become purpose, and silence can finally be broken. Because what comes next is a part of the story no one expected. After my husband passed, the silence in the house began to feel heavier than grief itself. It wasn't just the absence of his footsteps, or the empty chair across from me at dinner. It was the stillness that settled into every corner of my life. The phone didn't ring like it used to. The neighbors, once so lively and familiar, moved away or faded into their own routines. I tried to keep busy gardening puzzles, even volunteering at the library once a week. But the truth was, I was getting older. I could feel it. In my knees when I climbed the stairs. In my hands when I folded laundry. In my memory, sometimes, when names took a little longer to come. I didn't want to admit it at first, not even to myself, but the house felt too big. The nights felt too long. And the days, well, they just kept slipping by, one indistinguishable from the next. That's when my son started calling more. He had this warm tone in his voice again, like when he was little and used to fall asleep on my chest. He'd ask how I was feeling, if I'd eaten, if I was taking my medications. And, slowly, he began planting the idea. Mom, why don't you come stay with us for a while? You don't need to be all alone in that house. At first, I resisted. I didn't want to be a burden. I told him, I'm fine here, sweetheart. I've got everything I need. But part of me longed to say yes, to be around family again, to hear voices in the kitchen, to feel useful, included, visible. That part, the lonely, quiet part, was louder than my pride. So when he called again, this time with more insistence, I said yes. He sounded relieved, happy, even. He said, we'll clear out the guest room, make space for your things, it'll be good for all of us. And, just like that, a new chapter began. I remember packing up my things, not everything, just the essentials. Some clothes, family photos, my favorite mug, a few books, and the old music box my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. I tried to keep it light, to not take up too much space. That thought echoed in my mind a lot back then. Don't take up too much space. They picked me up in their SUV. My daughter-in-law smiled politely, offered to carry my bag. The house they lived in was big, modern, nothing like the home I had built with my husband. It smelled like lavender and glass cleaner. The walls were white, the furniture gray, the floors spotless. It was beautiful. It just didn't feel like me. Still, I told myself I was lucky. Not every elderly mother gets invited into their child's home. I reminded myself of that, constantly, whenever I felt a little in the way, whenever my suggestions about dinner were brushed off, whenever I offered to help and was told, no, Mom, just rest, we've got it. At first I thought they were just trying to be kind. Maybe they wanted me to relax, to not feel obligated. But over time, it became harder to ignore that I wasn't being included. I was being excluded. Quietly, subtly. I wasn't part of decisions. I wasn't part of routines. I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The guest room was clean, but small. No space for my bookshelves. No television. No armchair to sit and knit. They said they'd add those things later, but weeks passed, and nothing changed. I stayed mostly in that room. I didn't want to get in the way. Some evenings I'd hear them talking in the kitchen, laughing, making plans. I waited to be invited, but the invites rarely came. When I did step in to ask if they needed help, I was met with, oh, you don't have to worry about that, always with a smile, but never with warmth. There was a moment, maybe 2 weeks in, where I stood in the hallway, holding a tray of cookies I had baked from memory. It was a recipe from when my son was a child. He used to love them. I was proud of myself. I had baked them perfectly. But when I offered them, he said, thanks, Mom, took one, and then set the plate on the counter like it didn't matter. Maybe it sounds small, but it wasn't. It was the beginning of a realization that would only grow louder with time. I was not here because they missed me. I was here because they needed something. And slowly, I started to see the pieces falling into place: the tight control over my medication schedule, the requests for my financial login info just in case, the way my bank statements were casually brought up in conversation. At first, I dismissed it as concern. But concern doesn't come with that kind of detachment. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because what I discovered next wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a plan, one carefully built behind smiles and soft voices. And once I saw it clearly, I knew this wasn't care. It was something else entirely. Comment below. This makes sense to me if any part of this story reflected something you've experienced or felt inside, even if no one else noticed. It started with little things. Not loud, not obvious, just quiet shifts that only someone paying close attention would notice. The kind that don't scream danger, but whisper discomfort. My name on the mailbox was never added. My clothes were folded neatly, but always kept in a plastic storage bin under the bed, like I wasn't meant to unpack. I'd offer to cook, and they'd smile and say, "No need, Mom. We've already planned the meals this week." The first few times, I told myself they were just trying to be organized, thoughtful, but the pattern didn't change. I stopped being included in decisions, not just about food, but about household matters too. I was there, yet not really there. Present in body, missing in influence. Then came the comments, subtle, coated in politeness, but pointed. "We've been trying to save more lately," my daughter-in-law would say, glancing at the grocery bill. "Electricity's expensive these days," my son added one morning, as he lowered the thermostat in my room without asking. He called it energy efficiency. I felt it as another wall being built between us. My comfort, my habits, my routines suddenly became a negotiation I wasn't invited into. And then there was my money. One afternoon, while I was watching television in the living room, my son casually sat beside me and asked, "Mom, have you thought about consolidating your bank accounts? Might make things easier if something ever happened." I nodded politely, unsure of what he meant exactly. Then he added, "You know, just in case we need to help manage things. You never know what can happen at your age." That phrase, "at your age," it hit like a stone to the chest. Not because it wasn't true. I'm 78, and I've lived through enough to know my limits, but because it wasn't said with care. It wasn't said with love. It was said like I was already on my way out, like I was no longer a person making choices, just a body being prepared for the next stage dependency. And that's when I started paying attention in a different way, not just to their words, but to their tone. The way my daughter-in-law called me sweetheart but never asked how I was really doing. The way my son's voice shifted when I brought up my own ideas like he was humoring me. There's a kind of smile people wear when they're hiding something. I began to see it more often. One night, they sat me down at the kitchen table and handed me a folder. Inside were forms, financial forms, banking details, insurance papers, things I hadn't even looked at in months. "We thought we could help organize all this," he said, as if it were a favor. My daughter added, "It's just easier if everything's in one place, and we know what's where." I asked why. They both looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Mom, we just want to make sure you're taken care of," he said, but something in his eyes didn't match the words. It was too rehearsed, too tidy. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. That's when I knew this wasn't about help, it was about control. I told them I'd think about it, smiled politely, excused myself, and went to my room. But I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering how I got there. How I went from being the woman who once worked 3 jobs to raise that boy, to someone being handled like a piece of property. When you're older, people think you stop noticing, but you notice everything. You feel the shift in energy when you walk into a room. You hear the words that aren't being said. You see the way your name disappears from the family calendar, the way conversations happen around you, instead of with you. I kept a journal, small notes, dates, feelings. I wrote down what they said, how it made me feel, what I was beginning to suspect. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern. The same pattern many elderly parents experience when their autonomy slowly gets chipped away under the disguise of help. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the signs were only the beginning. What I discovered next revealed a truth I never thought I'd have to face, not from strangers, but from my own family. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you've ever felt that the care they offered you came with a price that no one had the courage to say out loud. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because the house was unusually quiet, and the sunlight coming through the blinds painted soft lines on the living room carpet. I had just finished folding a load of laundry, my way of still feeling useful in a place that no longer asked for my help. The television was off, the kettle still warm from the tea I had forgotten to finish. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I wasn't even trying to listen, but the door to the kitchen was cracked open just enough, and the voices carried more than they should have. At first, it was just casual chatter between my son and his wife. I could hear the clinking of plates, the rustle of grocery bags, and then the sentence that changed everything. "She's only here because of her retirement check." 8 words. That's all it took to unravel what I thought was love, what I thought was family. There was a pause after he said it. A silence that stretched so long I imagined even they realized the weight of it. His wife didn't respond immediately, at least, not with words. I didn't hear denial. I didn't hear outrage. I heard her laugh, low and dry, like someone acknowledging something that had already been said behind closed doors too many times to count. I stood frozen, laundry still in my hands. In that moment, I didn't feel sad, felt 100, 1,000. I felt ancient, like the very air in my lungs had turned to dust. I stared at my reflection in the dark television screen and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, not from the chores or the aging or the long days alone in that guest room, but from something deeper, something like betrayal. It's hard to explain the kind of silence that comes after a wound you never saw coming. It's not empty, it's heavy, loud in a way that fills your chest and presses against your ribs. I sat down slowly, the laundry forgotten, and let it wash over me. The truth, the sting, the realization that I hadn't been invited into their home because they missed me. I had been calculated into their lives like an asset, a line on a spreadsheet, a monthly deposit that made their plans easier. And suddenly, so many things started to make sense. The overly eager conversations about power of attorney, the not-so-subtle questions about my will, the insistence on helping with my online banking, the way they talked about investments and renovations while glancing in my direction, like I was part of a future they were budgeting for, not someone living and breathing and watching it all happen. The worst part wasn't the financial manipulation, it was the erasure. The slow, steady reduction of my identity into something transactional. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was a strategist, a tool, a means to an end, and the people I had once held in my arms, kissed goodnight, stayed up sick with, had now become the architects of a truth I hadn't asked to see. I didn't confront them right away. That might surprise you, but I needed time to absorb the blow, to understand the layers of what had just been exposed. This wasn't just one cruel comment, it was the tip of an iceberg built over years of quiet disregard, of smiles that never reached their eyes, of conversations I was deliberately left out of. I didn't cry that day, not right away. I sat there and tried to remember the last time my son had looked at me like I mattered, really looked, not out of duty, not with the empty politeness he used when friends were around, but with warmth. I couldn't remember. That realization broke me more than his words ever could. Later that night, I lay in bed with the lights off, listening to the muffled sounds of the house footsteps, a microwave door, distant laughter that didn't include me. I stared at the ceiling and thought, what am I doing here? I used to have a home. I used to have peace. I gave it up believing I was walking toward love and safety. And now, I wasn't sure where I belonged at all. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because what happened after that moment wasn't just emotional, it was revealing. It forced me to reevaluate not just how they saw me, but how I had started to see myself through their eyes. And what I found shook the ground beneath everything I thought I knew about loyalty and love. Comment below. That makes sense to me if you've ever heard words that changed your view of someone, even if they were said when they thought you weren't listening. It's a strange thing, the way truth reveals itself. Not all at once, like some dramatic outburst in a movie, but quietly, layer by layer, moment by moment, until you can't unsee it anymore. After I heard that sentence in the kitchen, I began looking at everything differently. Every word, every gesture, every word just trying to help felt like it carried something else underneath. And when you start paying attention, not just listening, but really paying attention, you begin to see what was there all along. It was never about care, not the kind that comes from love, at least. It was about control, the kind that creeps in disguised as support, the kind that makes you question your own instincts, like maybe you're the one overreacting. But I wasn't. Deep down, I knew something was off. I just didn't want to believe that the people I loved, trusted, could see me as anything less than a mother. I started replaying every interaction like a detective in my own life. The way my son insisted on reviewing my bank statements, just to be safe. How my daughter-in-law took over scheduling my doctor's appointments and suddenly decided which ones were necessary and which ones could wait. How I was never allowed to go alone, not even to refill a prescription. "We just don't want you to get confused," she said once, in that sweet tone that made the words feel like honey and poison at the same time. And then there were the papers. One afternoon, I came into the kitchen and found a manila envelope on the counter, my name, written in my daughter-in-law's handwriting. I opened it. Inside were printed forms, some for insurance, others I didn't even recognize. Legalese, financial authorizations. I skimmed through them, and one of them had a line highlighted, beneficiary primary contact, Joshua Taylor. That's my son. My signature was already printed beneath it. I hadn't signed it. That's when the chills settled into my bones. I asked him about it later, carefully. I didn't want to start a fight. Josh, did you fill something out in my name? He brushed it off. Just to get things moving. Mom, it's no big deal. We'll finalize it together. But I knew. He wasn't asking anymore. He was doing, and the more I looked, the more I saw the truth behind the invitation. It wasn't just my pension check. It was everything. My name, my identity, my autonomy, they were pieces in a plan I hadn't been consulted on. A future being arranged like furniture, with me in the corner. I noticed how they spoke when they thought I wasn't in the room. Not cruel, but calculated. If we convert the back room, it could raise the property value. She doesn't need 2 accounts, just one's enough. We'll talk to the lawyer next week, see what's needed. I wasn't in the room, but I was the subject, and there was something deeper, something that hurt more than the paperwork or the money. It was the erasure of me not just as a parent, but as a person. The way decisions were made around me, not with me. The way my past, everything I had lived, survived, built, was treated like a preface to a new story that didn't need my voice anymore. I stopped sleeping through the night. My dreams became restless memories of my husband, of raising Josh alone, of times when our bond felt unbreakable. I remembered the nights I stayed up sewing his costumes for school plays, the mornings I skipped breakfast so he could have lunch money. I remembered sacrificing without ever keeping score. And now here I was, being kept like a line item in a long-term plan. What do you do when love becomes negotiation? I started keeping my purse with me at all times. My ID, my checkbook, my bank cards. I no longer trusted the places they used to sit. I knew that if I left them, even for a few minutes, something could change without my knowing. That fear, quiet, persistent, humiliating, followed me everywhere in that house. And maybe the worst part was pretending I didn't see it, pretending I was still grateful, smiling when they handed me pills, laughing softly when they said, "Don't worry about anything, Mom. We've got everything under control." That sentence echoed in my mind like a warning bell. Under control. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because what I discovered next wasn't just unsettling, it was devastating, and it made me question whether what I'd been calling family was ever truly love, or just convenience dressed up as care. Right there, I'm on this journey too. If you've ever noticed that decisions were being made about your life, without asking if it was still yours. Something shifted in me the day I found that second envelope tucked into the drawer where I kept my Bible. I hadn't seen it before. It wasn't even hidden well, just lying there like they didn't think I'd notice, or maybe didn't believe I'd understand what it was. It was a draft of a living trust. My name was on it. So was my son's. But what struck me wasn't the paper, it was the date. It had been prepared weeks before I even moved in, before the offer, before the hug at my front door, before they helped me pack. They knew exactly what they were doing. I sat there, staring at that paper with hands that trembled not from age, but from rage and grief. It's a strange grief, the one you feel when someone you raise becomes someone you don't recognize, when love curdles into strategy, when you're no longer a mother in their eyes, just an opportunity. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep waking up every morning, making myself small in a house that didn't want me whole. I knew I needed to find a way out, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I needed to reclaim myself, and sometimes, strength comes from unexpected places. Her name was Carol. We hadn't spoken in years. She used to live down the street from me, back when I had my own place. We'd share recipes, gossip about the neighbors, talk about how our knees were getting worse every winter. I found her number in an old notebook I'd kept in my purse. I don't even know what made me call, maybe. I just needed a voice from before all this, a voice that remembered who I used to be. She answered on the third ring, and the moment I heard her say my name, I started to cry. Not sobs, just silent, hot tears that came from a place I hadn't touched in months. She didn't ask questions at first. She just let me breathe, let me be, and then, Gently, she said, "What's going on, sweetheart?" So I told her. Everything. Every shift. Every form. Every moment that made me feel like I was fading in my own life. And Carol, blessed her, she didn't try to fix it. She didn't offer cliches. She listened like only someone who's lived long enough to understand can. And she said something that stuck with me. They might think they're protecting you, but what they're really doing is stealing your voice. That was the moment I decided I was taking it back. That night, I stayed up and started searching. Quietly, carefully. I read articles about elder rights. I found organizations that offered free legal advice. I even watched videos from other women just like me, who had been through this silent kind of abuse. And yes, it is abuse. Not with bruises, not with yelling, but with erasure, with control, with kindness that has a contract buried. Inside, I began to understand the language. Words like financial guardianship, involuntary placement, coercion, things I never imagined I'd need to know. But knowledge is power, no matter your age. And every new thing I learned added a brick to the foundation I was rebuilding under my feet. I started documenting more. Dates, conversations, accounts. I called the bank, changed passwords. I had the documents reviewed by someone who explained them to me in plain language finally. Someone who spoke to me, not around me. And most of all, I made a plan. I would leave, not in a storm, not with screaming, but with dignity, with strength, on my terms. Because for all the manipulation and silence, they had forgotten something. I'm still here. I've survived too much in this life to be undone by a few signatures on a paper. I've buried a husband, raised a child alone, worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I know how to start over. I know how to stand up. They thought I'd forgotten, but I didn't. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because reclaiming your voice after being silenced isn't just powerful, it's sacred. And it comes with revelations that don't just change your story. They change who you are becoming. Comment below. I'm recognizing myself again if you've ever gone through the moment where you realized you could no longer wait for someone to save you. Because true rescue begins within us. The morning I chose to speak was quiet, not dramatic, not chaotic, just still. There was a weight in the air, the kind that settles before something irreversible. I'd already packed a small bag, not everything, just what mattered. My documents, my medication, a photo of my husband holding our son as a baby. That picture reminded me why I had held on for so long, and why, now, I had to let go. I walked into the kitchen. My son was at the table, scrolling through his phone, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. My daughter-in-law was slicing fruit, ordinary things. Mundane, but nothing felt ordinary anymore. I stood there for a second. I don't think they even noticed me. Maybe they'd gotten used to tuning me out. Background noise, until I cleared my throat, not loud, but enough to silence the room. He looked up. "Mom, you okay?" I nodded. "Yes, I'm okay, but we need to talk." He set his phone down slowly. She kept her knife in hand, and I spoke not with bitterness, not with rage, but with clarity. With the kind of clarity that only comes when you've been quiet too long. "I heard what you said," I began, "that I'm only here because of my retirement, that I'm more useful than loved, that I'm part of some plan I was never part of." He opened his mouth. "Mom, that's not, don't," I said, calmly, firmly. "Don't lie, not now." The room was thick with silence. I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't look at her. My words weren't for her. "I raised you with everything I had," I continued. "I sacrificed pieces of myself so you could have a future. And I never asked for anything in return, not because I didn't need help, but because I believed love didn't come with conditions. But now I see. You weren't helping me, you were managing me." He looked down. "Shame, maybe, or maybe just guilt caught in the act. You took my trust and turned it into leverage," I said. "You filled out papers in my name, made choices without my consent, treated me like I was fading before I ever disappeared." My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. In that moment, I wasn't fragile. I was fire-contained. "I'm leaving," I said, finally. Not because I have somewhere perfect to go. Not because I've figured it all out. But because I'd rather face the unknown with dignity than stay in a place that doesn't see me. He didn't try to stop me. She didn't speak. And that silence, that perfect, echoing silence, was the confirmation I didn't know I needed. I picked up my bag. Walked to the front door. My heart was heavy, yes, But it was also light in a new way, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't moving for anyone else. I was moving for me. I didn't know where the journey would take me. I didn't know how hard it might get. But I knew I had taken the first step back to myself. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because what happens after you walk away is not just a continuation, it's a transformation. It's the moment where fear meets freedom, and the real story begins. Comment: I chose my dignity. If you've ever had to leave a place that diminished you, just to remember that you were still whole. I walked out that door with nothing more than a small bag and my name, but that was enough. Because reclaiming your name, your space in the world, that's a kind of power nobody teaches you when you're young. They teach you how to give, how to nurture, how to stay quiet for peace. But they don't always teach you how to choose yourself without apology. And maybe that's something we learn later in life, when the noise finally fades, and all that's left is your own voice saying, "You still matter." And let me tell you something I now hold like a truth carved in stone. Growing older doesn't mean growing invisible. Aging doesn't cancel your value, it deepens it. It adds weight to your words, history to your presence, and dignity to your silence. But even so, silence isn't always the answer, because real love is never a transaction. It's not a favor disguised as family. It doesn't calculate benefits or track what you're worth in dollars. Real love protects, it honors, it makes room at the table, even when you forget how to ask. And as I sat on that bus bench that day, the one just down the hill from their house, I didn't feel like someone who'd lost a home. I felt like someone who'd just remembered she had the right to one. I looked around at strangers passing by, the buzz of cars, the sunlight warming the top of my head, and I thought, this world is still mine. My age doesn't disqualify me from starting again. If anything, it gives me more reason to. That moment wasn't about bitterness. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. About drawing the line between being helpful and being used. Between staying out of fear and walking away with self-respect. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave without slamming the door. Just close it, gently, and never look back. I don't know what the next chapter holds. Maybe I'll find a new place, maybe I'll reconnect with someone from the past. Maybe I'll simply have peace, and honestly, that would be enough. But whatever it is, I'll face it with my head up and my heart steady. Because I chose dignity over comfort, truth over illusion, and myself over the silence that was slowly erasing me. And if you're listening to this, and something inside you is nodding, if you've felt even a fraction of what I've shared, let me tell you, you're not alone, and you're not weak. You're just waking up to the truth you've been carrying for too long. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because breaking free is one thing. Staying free, that's where the real journey begins. Comment: I'm on this journey too, if you know that starting over is an act of courage, even when no one understands why. And if you stayed with me until now, thank you. Truly, stories like this aren't easy to tell or to hear, but they matter, because they help us remember that our voice, no matter our age, still carries weight. If something Aki resonated with you, if this story reflected even a piece of what you've lived or felt, let me know down in the comments. Just write, "I'm with you until the end." That way, I'll know this message reached the hearts it was meant to reach. And if this kind of story brings you clarity, comfort, or even just the feeling of not being alone, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. It's how we keep building this space, real, honest, and ours. Don't forget to tap that like button it tells YouTube this conversation matters and helps take this message to more people who may be going through something similar. And hey, there's another video right here that dives even deeper into this universe of choices, respect, and dignity. Click on it and keep walking with me. We've still got a lot to share.